Disturbing facts that will ruin your day.
Firstly, you know these vacuum toilets that are most commonly used on planes and cruise ships? Well, there have been many reports of them sucking the rectum out of people when they flush. Next, this is just disappointing. 1 in 4 Americans actually believe that the sun rotates around the earth. Now, studies show that the average person will wait 5 months of their lifetime for red lights to turn green. You know when you're watching a movie or TV show and you hear these laugh tracks in the background? Well, most of them were recorded in the 50s, so you're hearing dead people laugh. This will ruin your childhood. The Red Power Ranger, Ricardo Medina, pleaded guilty to killing his roommate with a sword. Finally, you are now closer to death than you were when you started this video.
Here are some cool things about animals that you probably didn't know. Ants will form living rafts with their bodies. Some will drown so others can float. Bearded dragons can change their sex in the egg depending on the temperature. Flying snakes will flatten their bodies and glide through the air like living frisbees. That is absolutely terrifying. Koalas have fingerprints that are so human-like that they have been confused in police investigations for humans. Wombats poop cubes, and not only that, they stack them like bricks to mark their territory. Male antechinus mate non-stop for 14 hours, then die from immune system collapse. A female giant panda is only capable of conceiving a cub for 24 to 72 hours once a year. Salmon return to their birthplace to spawn, then die. Arctic terns migrate 50,000 miles annually to take advantage of both the summer conditions in the Arctic and in Antarctica. Wisdom the albatross is still laying eggs at nearly 70 years old and has been tracked since 1956. Wasps save $417 billion in crops each year by eating pests. Pistol shrimp stun prey with bubble shockwaves, disrupting small reef ecosystems. Termites do actually eat wood faster when listening to rock music. Penguins will actually nap thousands of times a day, which helps them survive these brutal Antarctic conditions they live in. Parasitic wasps will inject spiders with venom and force them to build baby nests. Damn.
30 men could beat up Mike Tyson, so 100 could definitely murk a gorilla. But Tyson would physically ruin at least one and probably some of those men. And that's where the problem's at. Let's break it down. Gorillas are non-violent and actually go out of their way to avoid conflict. 100 men pulling up for smoke would have this energy. And speaking of energy, gorillas have terrible endurance. They fight the way the fades they run are like how they're hung, not long at all. You have to remember, the main thing that made humans such a nightmare for the thumbless was the power of friendship and stamina. The gorilla's liable to catch a heart attack. Also, I'm gonna be real with you, y'all overrate gorillas by an insane degree. I know that because this right here should have never been a debate. A gorilla's not finna run through 100 men, and also, y'all talking like this a movie fight scene. This ain't 100 one-on-ones, this 1 on 100. Jujutsu Kaisen level jumping's the only outcome. 1 hyena to a lion is a chew toy. 20 is a life lesson. Now, there's a catch. Gorillas have a stronger bite force than a grizzly bear, and a gorilla batter arm to the back would probably crack your constitution like a glow stick. This is what 100 people looks like. 100 men could kill a gorilla. 100 men could not kill a gorilla without some meeting Batman's parents, especially if the gorilla's fighting for its life. Someone's getting their eyes gouged out, someone's getting their arm bit through, and someone's gonna be able to use Face ID 20 feet away. Now it's a question of altruism over ability. The bystander effect would do numbers, and no one's gonna want to be the guy to get KIA'd at first contact. So to recap, 100 men could kill a gorilla. 100 men wouldn't kill a gorilla, they get sabotaged by self-preservation. The gorilla would be overwhelmed or at some point exhausted, but not before getting absolutely medieval on some unlucky men. And we have strayed so far from the days of Harambe. The more you know, for now.
Child marriage used to be legal in America, and the story of this marriage is one of the most disturbing things I've ever read about. This is 9-year-old Eunice Winstead, and this is her legal husband at the time, Charlie Johns. So on January 19th, 1937, Eunice, who was 9 years old at the time, left her mother's house. On that morning, she told her parents that she was going out to buy herself a new doll. But instead, the 9-year-old was headed to the courthouse to meet her 22-year-old future husband, Charlie Johns. So at the time of this affair, there was no age limit on marriage in Tennessee. I mean, technically, someone could have married an adult and a baby if they paid off the minister and got everything to go through properly. And so on that day, 22-year-old Charlie offered a local Baptist preacher named Walter $1, which equates to around $21 today. And the preacher accepted the offer, came into the church, and married the 9-year-old to the 22-year-old. I mean, obviously, words cannot possibly describe how disturbing images like these are. Now, at first, both Charlie and Eunice's parents disapproved of the marriage, but after some thought, they eventually approved the marriage, and they just allowed them to live together and be married. Now, sadly, Eunice dropped out of school at the age of 9 after her husband, Charlie, pulled her out, and she began giving birth to their children at age 15. They'd eventually have 8 children together. I just cannot believe that shit like this used to happen in America. Comment your thoughts on this below.
She went to a party and ended up in the freezer. Nobody knows how, and the hotel kept silent about it. Her name was Kanika. She was 19 from Chicago, and one night she told her mom that she was going to go bowling with her friends, but instead she goes to a hotel to a party. Her friends call her mom saying that they lost track of her at the party, and her mom's like, wait, what party? They told her that they left Kanika in the hotel hallway while they went to go back to the room to grab her phone and the car keys, and when they came back, she was gone. Her mom, Teresa, she was pissed, yeah, but mostly she was super worried. She rushes to the hotel and she is begging the staff to show her the hotel surveillance footage so that she can find her daughter, but they refuse, and they tell her that she has to file a missing persons report first. So she goes to the police, and guess what they say? You gotta wait a while until she shows up. Like, what? That's giving we don't care. Her family starts banging on the hotel doors, desperate to find her, and instead of helping, the hotel calls the police for disturbing the peace. And when the police finally decide to do their job, it has already been 20 hours. And when they check the cameras, they see Kanika. She's alone, stumbling through the hallways, clearly intoxicated. And then at one point, she wanders into a restricted kitchen area and then just disappears. Hours later, a hotel employee opens that freezer in the same kitchen and finds her body inside. Face down, her left arm is pinched underneath her. She has a shoe that's missing and a cut on her foot. And then her shirt, it is pulled under her jacket, exposing her chest. Now, go ahead and tell me how that's an accident. The one area with no cameras in the exact same place where she ends up. That's not a coincidence. That is somebody who knew the layout of that hotel. Someone who knew exactly where the cameras were and weren't. But the police, they still ruled it an accident, said that she just froze to death. But her mom does not believe that. She said, and I quote, "I feel like they helped my child." And honestly, I do too, because if the hotel would have shown that footage from the start, if police hadn't made her wait, maybe Kanika would have been saved. But what do you guys think? Was it an accident or a cover-up?
Yes, this really did happen. In 2015, a man woke up to a strange post-it note sitting on his desk. On it was a to-do list that he didn't recognize in handwriting that didn't look like his. Since he was up late the night before doing some work, he assumed he must have written out the list when he was half asleep and kind of forgot about it, so he just crumples it up and throws it away. 2 weeks later, he wakes up to dozens of these post-it notes all over his wall, and they're all blank except for one that, in the same weird handwriting, says, "Our landlord isn't letting me talk to you." Now feeling totally freaked out that some crazy person is crawling around his apartment at night, he starts looking for signs of a break-in, but there aren't any. Instead of calling the police, he shares his experience on Reddit asking for help, and one user's comment literally saves his life. Turns out the man was writing the notes to himself and then forgetting, because his brain was slowly dying due to a carbon monoxide leak that was only discovered because a user suggested he install a detector.
Everyday things we do that feel illegal but are not. Leaving a store without buying anything. Sometimes I just buy something cheap just because it feels so weird. And how about using the restroom without buying anything? It just feels so wrong. Calling in sick to work when you're actually sick. For some reason, I think like my boss thinks I'm lying to him. Next, asking a salesperson about an item and end up not buying it. I sometimes wish I apologized to them for wasting their time. And finally, leaving class when the bell rings and not when the teacher dismisses you.
If you ever feel like you're being haunted, run, or call Zan Kui. Click the plus drop a like, tag a friend, share with 3, or you might become haunted. Zan Kui is a demon hunter, also the king of the ghosts. Zan Kui is there to protect people from the ghosts, and anything supernatural. He also commands an army of 80,000 demons, not someone to mess with. When Zan Kui was alive, he was an extremely bright student, but sadly committed suicide. The ruler of the underworld saw the potential in Zan Kui, and gave him unlimited power, making him the king of the ghosts, and the demon hunter. If you made it this far, comment down below who I should do next.
Haunted dolls from around the world. America. Annabelle. Japan, Okiku, Singapore, the Barbie doll on the girls' shrine, Australia, Letter, Brazil, Farfa, Canada, Mandy the doll, Italy, Pupa the doll,
She killed her mum so she wouldn't find out about her secret, but now the whole world knows. It was the 3rd of March 2020 when police were called to do a welfare check on a property in Ohio at around 1 p.m. Brenda Powell lived in the house. She was the 50-year-old mother of Sydney Powell. And Brenda worked at Akron Children's Hospital and was such a grafter, and they absolutely loved her there. She treated the kids at the hospital like they were her own kids, always so loving and caring. Now, the welfare check came about after Brenda had been on the phone with Sydney's former school, the University of Mount Union. Now, during the phone call, the member of staff that she was on the line to suddenly heard banging and screaming, and then the line went dead. And he actually tried to call her number back, and it just rang out and out. And after ringing back twice and getting no answer, he knew he had to ring the police. When officers arrived at the property, they found Brenda Powell in a pool of blood on the floor, and tragically, after being rushed to hospital, she was pronounced dead. Investigators knew they needed to work out what had led to this horrific murder. Now, the conversation that Brenda had been having on the day with the school on the phone was absolutely vital to finding out who was responsible. Brenda had in fact been made aware on the call that 19-year-old Sydney, who was, as I said, her daughter, had in fact been kicked out of the school, and she was no longer a student there. It was no coincidence that it was during this phone call that the mum had been murdered. Now, when police found her body at her home, the only other person at the scene was Sydney, her daughter, and Sydney had an interesting tale to tell. She told police there'd been a break-in, she heard a noise, and apparently her mum had told her to run for her life. She said she'd heard screaming and then had run back to her mum and found Brenda on the floor. Now, that just sounds suspicious to me. Like, why would you run for your life because you know there's a danger, hear screaming, and decide to run straight back into that danger? After being questioned, it was very clear that the officers were not buying this story that Sydney was telling, so she actually started to tell a different tale. She would try and plead insanity. She said she could barely remember anything from that day. She just remembered crying and feeling like she needed to run away. Brenda had suffered 30 stab wounds and had also been struck in the head. This was obviously a very brutal attack. But Sydney's defense in court tried to claim that she was suffering from an undiagnosed schizophrenic episode and that she killed her mum while experiencing like a psychotic break. However, it is very rare for people with schizophrenia to act violently, and it was concluded that Sydney had been exaggerating her symptoms to try and get away with this murder. She was thankfully found guilty of murder and given life in prison, but is eligible for parole after 15 years.
New shocking information about Jarrett Williams, the 5th grade teacher who wrote the grooming love letter to his student. The school board did not even ask him to resign. They moved him to a position that was not around any students. But then I guess as the story broke is when he resigned. Now, I went onto the Facebook of Gullet Elementary and I found a lot more photos of this teacher. I've got more video of when the mom and dad approached the school board complaining about this teacher and his actions with this love letter. And what's shocking, as you're going to see on the video, is that even these, what are they, superintendents, these people on the board are saying that they have heard more from public comment than they did anywhere else. Now, apparently there is an investigation that is going on, and there are supposed to be non-actual, as they say, non-actual charges filed against him at this point. But based on this letter and the 45 minutes he spent alone with her on Valentine's, we don't even know if there's any other time, as well as this comment about the slime, which don't get me started, there really needs to be a criminal investigation on this guy.
To the core, that shocked me. This is horrific, and I commend her bravery to speak up, because she's probably saying.
I have a copy of the 2-page handwritten textbook grooming letter that was written by this teacher and given to my 11.
Says they reassigned Williams to a position that didn't have any contact with students, but now it isn't just parents asking if the optics of the district were prioritized over student safety.
I learned more about this case from public comment than I did from the superintendent.
The board voting to accept Williams' resignation while under investigation, which will still result in his file being flagged.
Shortly after this photo was taken, the beautiful bride would be killed. I'm True Crime Caitlin, and this is the death of Samantha Miller. On the 28th of April 2023, 37-year-old Eric Hutchinson and 34-year-old Samantha Miller finally tied the knot in front of 120 guests on Folly Beach in North Carolina. They had a beautiful ceremony and spent the rest of the evening celebrating. At around 10 p.m, Eric and Samantha, along with 2 other people, climbed into a golf cart and began to make their way back to their accommodation nearby, when they would be ploughed into by a car going 65 miles an hour, 40 miles over the speed limit. Driving that car was 26-year-old Jamie Lee Komorowski, who was drunk out of her mind over 3 times the legal limit. Eric and the 2 other passengers were severely injured, whereas Samantha, who was still wearing her wedding dress, would die at the scene. Upon the policeman's arrival, Jamie Lee, who was drunk and slurring her words, told the police that something had crashed into her. He would be arrested on several charges, including 3 DUIs and reckless homicide. Jamie would spend the next 10 months in jail. However, in March of this year, she was released on a $150,000 bond and was placed under house arrest. She must abide to strict conditions, including not leaving the house unless it is for medical attention or a court date. She must wear a tracker around her ankle, all while she awaits trial. She has expressed no remorse for what she did to Samantha, and allegedly in a jail call between her and her dad, she was complaining that this was going to ruin her life. In another call, her and her sister are chatting, where Jamie says that within the next 2 years, she should be living her best life. When her trial finally comes, if she is convicted of all of her charges, she could face up to 25 years in prison. Sadly, Eric and Samantha's mum Lisa are in a messy court dispute over Samantha's inheritance. Eric has filed a wrongful death lawsuit, which could see him receiving upwards of millions of dollars for Samantha's death. And Lisa, who has challenged the validity of her daughter and son-in-law's marriage, has said that she believes she should be the sole beneficiary. Allegedly, Eric has offered to give Lisa half of any money that he receives. However, he and Lisa are sadly going through a very messy legal battle.
She's convinced she went on a date with a possible serial killer. This girl named Tiffany Matthews made a video talking about when she was in college, she went on a date with this guy and immediately started to notice red flags. She met this guy at a bar, they immediately hit it off and ended up exchanging phone numbers. They had their first date, and when he picked her up, it was in a very nice, expensive car, but she found it strange that he didn't know how to work the car. For example, he didn't know how to open the car door, and if that's your car, wouldn't you know how to open the door at least? So she just assumed that this wasn't his car. Everything went well for the first date, and since Tiffany was going to be busy with studying, they weren't able to plan a second date right away. Once they were able to find time to get together, he suggested that they go to a park late at night. She agrees, and when he shows up, he's about an hour and a half late, and he's in a completely different car. This second car that he is driving is completely run down, and immediately he tells her it's because he has dogs and he doesn't want his dogs to get his nice car dirty, and he was running late because he was getting gas. They then make their way to Gasworks Park, which is in Seattle, Washington. While on this date, Tiffany started to feel very uneasy about this guy because he started making jokes about unaliving her and told her that he was so excited to see her that he wore 2 different pairs of shoes. This park that they were at was very secluded and obviously very dark since they were there at night, and she was feeling very uneasy because he was still continuing with these jokes. So she ended up lying to him, telling him that her dad was a cop and that her roommates had her location, which was true. He replied to her saying, "Well, how accurate is your location?" which is a very odd thing to say. At this point, Tiffany is thinking of any kind of way she can get away from this date, so she just tells him that she needs to study and needs to go back home. Tiffany does not want to go back into this car with this guy and would rather just walk home, but then she remembers that she left her purse in his car, so she has no choice but to go back to his car. When they arrived at his car, she opened the door and grabbed her purse, and she just happened to look up at the gas gauge and it was nearly empty. At this point, Tiffany felt her heart drop because he had told her he was running late because he was getting gas, so now that she knew that he was lying, what was he really doing that whole time? Luckily, right next to this guy's car was another car parked with a couple inside, so Tiffany knocks on their window and asks if she can wait with them until her ride comes because she's feeling unsafe on her date. As soon as that guy saw her talking to the car next to him, he immediately sped off, she blocked him, and never spoke to him again. If you're ever in a situation like this, it's always important to trust your intuition because this could have ended bad really fast.
This girl believes that her stepfather could be Mr. Cruel. In the 1980s in Australia, Mr. Cruel would torture and assault children while their families were gone, and he never got caught for it. He also never left any evidence behind, and he would mentally torture all of the families. Now, this girl posted on Reddit, on the Mr. Cruel subreddit, it's the top of all time if you want to search it up yourself, about how she believes her stepdad is Mr. Cruel, and she listed out these 10 reasons. In all of Mr. Cruel's known assault locations, her dad worked right near there. He also apparently drove the same make and model of car that they described him having. He asked relatives to use a video camera, however, she never saw her dad really use it for anything. She also goes on to say how there is a violence/SA issue on her dad's side of the family. Apparently, she also has trauma from her childhood, and then her parents got a divorce 6 months after that trauma happened. She didn't state what the trauma exactly was, but she did say the 6 months later divorce that her parents got lined up with Mr. Cruel's last victim. Mr. Cruel was known to force feed his victims. Apparently, her father loved to force feed them or feed them a lot. She also stated one of the police sketches looked exactly like her father and that it could have been a photo of him. Her last reason's kind of vague. She just said her dad's smart, knows about science. Now, she posted 2 updates on Reddit. She got educated on the case and the information, and she went to the police and dropped 2 names. Apparently, the 2 names she dropped are on a list of people being investigated for being linked to Mr. Cruel's attacks. Her last update stated that they're investigating this heavily and she doesn't want to ruin the investigation or, criminalize her father if he's not the guy. She said she would update if there is an update. There hasn't been one in about 340 days. Now, could this be legit or could this be somebody just making up something for attention? That is the biggest speculation people have right now. A lot of people can just make anything up on the internet, vague statements, or just research a story and make precise statements. Nobody's going to know if it's true or not. Let me know your thoughts about the story, and if you haven't yet, go read the full Reddit post and let me know what your thoughts are.